Hello, very nice to meet all of you here. My name is Melissa Lim. I have been a consultant in leadership and talent development for more than 15 years already. And I'm also a brain tumor patient. And because of my personal experience, I have since become a founder and the president of the Brain Tumor Society in Singapore. So it's my privilege today to introduce you the topic of leadership for effectiveness and impact. And well, to start us with, I'd like us to think about making an impact. That's what this topic is about, isn't it? We perhaps have come across nonprofit leaders who make impact. And how do we recognize them? Well, we probably know them as those people who make big waves with limited resources. And they are the ones who are very visible in the time of crisis. And they just know what to do with a wealth of experience. And obviously, they're very charismatic. They attract people to the mission. And those that they help feel that they are truly understood. These are the leaders with a heart to listen. And they always make the right call. And they live to open doors and knock down barriers. And they define success. And they don't stop until they reach it. Whoa, that sounds like a tall order, isn't it? Well, today I'm here to make it simpler for all of you. Perhaps, it's really hard to understand leadership, by looking at just the qualities of certain people. But if we have a framework that may help you understand your own qualities, understand your developmental areas, and more importantly, I hope that what we talk about today would be useful to helping you develop your teams. Now, before I go further, I think we need to take a step back to understand the tasks that senior leaders are expected to do in civil society, especially in the area of cancer control. So what are the tasks, or what are the key objectives, or what are the humongous missions that we are supposed to stand up to? So let's take a look at that first. And perhaps by understanding these challenges, we would be able to figure out what we need to have in order to be successful. Well, the first thing is to understand the landscape. The strategic challenges that nonprofit CEO face, regardless of wherever you are at in the world, I believe would be the four challenges of finance, competition, operational, and the talent challenge. Now, these challenges are actually highlighted by Jean Crawford in her very enlightening article called Profiling the Nonprofit Leader of Tomorrow. And with the benefit of her research, I'm going to share with you what these challenges mean. Firstly, the four strategic challenge in the area of finance, for example, the nonprofit CEO needs to understand that he or she has the responsibility of leading the organizations towards financial stability. In other words, you need to make the dollars and cents of things. In addition, apart from you and perhaps the honorary treasurer having a clear view of financial awareness, there is also a need for the leaders in the team to also have a culture of financial awareness. In addition, it is about bringing value to the clients that we serve. In some countries, we call them beneficiaries. But regardless, we need to think about the value proposition. For example, the service offerings, are they still relevant? Is there a way that we can make our services more valuable to the people that we intend to serve? Let's move on to the second strategic challenge, and that is in the area of competitors, competition. We have to understand as well, and we know fully well, that there is a constant competition for all kinds of resources. For example, We all may be in the non-profit sector, but we are vying for the attention of donors. At the same time, in your region or in your countries, there could be competition with regards to securing the governmental grants and the support of different corporations for their donation dollars and their volunteer hours. At the same time, there are shifts in philanthropy. Nowadays, the young donors especially, they want to resonate with the cause. A lot of what they do and what they give is driven by their personal initiatives. They are aware of issues and they want to be personally involved in the world through social media. And that really influences their decision to give, whether in terms of financial resources or in terms of their time. And because of this shift in philanthropy, we find that organizations that used to depend on the old ways of appealing for charity has now to invest in technology. For example, reaching new segments of donors through social media, digital marketing, and also enabling donations to be received digitally. Now, talking about the box where you see there's all gears, now that is operations. Well, operation is really a very big area. It comprises of leaders trying to find a way to make the public more aware about your mission. There are serious concerns by some leaders, perhaps, that, the government should be consulting the non-profit sector whenever policies are being made about us. However, in reality, most governments may be consulting the non-profit sector as an afterthought. So we have to figure out how to increase our social reach. And communication, therefore, it's very core. We need to be motivating and inspiring. And at the same time, there is a need for us to step up to expectations of governments and our donors and our stakeholders in ensuring transparency and accountability. And there's a lot to do in terms of gaining alignment, whether vertically with the board or horizontally with your collaborators and those who work with you in the teams. And restructuring the organization is something perhaps that we have to consider from time to time. And finally, we come to the happy phase, and that is a challenge, isn't it? Trying to make everyone in the team happy and satisfied with their jobs. And it's not easy in a non-profit sector, because the luxury of paying huge compensation is not ours to have. So we have to find different ways of motivating people and pulling in young talent to build a pipeline of leaders. And how do we do that? We need to figure out how to engage the organization. And at the same time, as we are gearing towards collective leadership, there is a greater need to learn how to value and manage diversity. So with that, these are the things that we all need to be mindful of, that we have to be able to deliver as non-profit sector leaders. And fortunately, the author of the research that I was talking about has proposed that in order to deliver all these expectations of us, we need 15 things. And she classified them into knowledge, competencies, and personality traits. Well, I would like to enlighten us about what all these means. Well, knowledge basically refers to education, professional training, things that you know that enable you to make decisions. So these would be knowledge, and we are talking about financial acumen, deep sector-specific knowledge, and perhaps knowledge about different cultures and how to value and manage diversity. Now, competencies, on the other hand, refers to your abilities. That means the skills that you have, the skills that you have that will enable you to be a good strategic thinker, to build relationships, to collaborate, to be entrepreneurial in your approach, and perhaps leading change or even motivating others. So these are skills that we need to develop. And personality traits pretty much is part of us, is in us. Okay. And we talk about, high intensity. That's what she says, but I prefer to think high focus. That sounds better, right? And being adaptable, being agile, being persevering, and also being interpersonally sensitive and definitely passionate about the missions. Fast forward to today, you find that what Jean Crawford talked about, it's developed and evolved into something that's called the success profile. So I'm going to introduce success profiles to you, and you notice that 3 of what she has suggested in terms of category, it's right here. We have knowledge, as an explain, what you know that enable you to process and to make decisions. And we also have competencies, as I explained, refers to abilities, what you can do. And we have personal attributes, which is right here. It refers to who I am, what I like, what values do I resonate with, what are my passions. And finally, something that is new, it's the addition of experience, what I have done. So I like us to think about leaders or anyone, any professional. Your effectiveness, all right, what the success profile suggests, depends on a holistic assessment, or rather possession of what you have in these 4 categories. You have to have the requisite knowledge. At the same time, you have to have the right balance of abilities, and your personality has to align with the core values of the organization or the cause that you are standing for. And finally, you also need to have the right experience. Now, each of this area has, of course, its own, its own theories that we have to explore. Like, for example, knowledge is not just about data and information. It's really about applying data and information to make reasonable conclusions, and at the same time, perhaps a higher level of acquiring knowledge is wisdom, the practical wisdom in how we lead and how we guide and how we make decisions. Competencies, again, has many, many subgroups. We have what we call the generic competencies that we may expect everyone in an organization to have. Or we may say that it's a domain competencies where it refers to a particular domain. Like, for example, you could have like competencies in technology or competencies in healthcare. Okay, this is what we call domain competencies in some organizations. And we could also have something that's called leadership competencies. And personal attributes, there are many ways that we try to figure out the personal attributes of people. Of course, they are expected to share about what they think, or who they think they are during an interview. But there are professional ways of doing it. For example, having a psychometric test, all right? That would be one way that many organizations use to figure out the personality profiling of a person. Now, this is very important because personal attributes are very, or rather, they really belong to the person. And therefore, it is less trainable. And at the same time, we have to understand that how they are as a person really determines their motivators, their drivers for their motivation. And it is important to figure out a person's values and motivations, and whether or not they align to the nature of the job, the sector, and the organization in order to ensure a successful fit in the first place. And the experience, of course, refers to what you have done. The experience could be a passive or active participation. So we have to be careful about that when we ask a person about their experience, right? And with that, I'm now going to explain how success profile works. So let's start with a very simple example. And I'm going to start at the level of, let's say, an individual contributor. So before I show you a sample success profile, I like to qualify that it is not a universal template that applies to every organization and everyone. It's simply to show you a sample so you understand how it works. And I pretty much base it in the context of Brain Tumor Society Singapore, my organization in Singapore. So an individual contributor, for example, is expected to have the right level of knowledge to do his or her work, the relevant sector knowledge, the relevant country-specific experience, and the relevant education and technical and professional knowledge. Now, the person is also expected to have the skills to, for example, fundraise, right? Having a knowledge of fundraising or finance is not good enough. The person must be able to translate that knowledge into a way that delivers performance through, engaging, her skills, being able to write, being able to perhaps, interact and appeal and persuade others. So these I would like to suggest are things that perhaps an individual contributor should have. And in addition, the experience could be anything that's relevant to the job or the role that he or she is performing. And in terms of personal attributes, and because my organization is in caring for brain tumor patients, it would be very nice if the individual contributor would be personable, caring, communicative, open-minded, receptive to feedback, and reflective, at the same time responsible and organized and passionate about helping others and adaptable. So that is at the individual contributors level. And you would notice that your job description may contain some of this, but it should never be a full success profile in the job advertisement, because obviously this is also a talent strategy for your organization's success. Now, how is the individual contributor going to step up to leadership? Well, how would we know? This is where it's helpful to have a success profile of the next level. Let's say it's a nonprofit manager. And you would notice that it's kind of different to what we saw earlier. Because earlier we're looking at individual contributor where they're expected to do the work. For example, in the area of just having knowledge of finance or social impact reporting, the manager is expected to know the entire reporting process for charities. You see, so it's a step up. In addition, the manager is expected to know how to lead and develop teams. And at the same time, instead of being very relevant and specific only to know things that only your job requires, perhaps the nonprofit manager needs to have a broader sector knowledge and at the same time a deep knowledge of the country in terms of policy making, advocacy, and data gathering, right? So that is an example of how a success profile like this would help someone who is more junior understand the gaps that they may be facing and therefore should be developing. So I hope this helps to explain to you, how development and success planning can be systematically done through having success profiles. Then in terms of competencies as well, it's not just about solving your own problems and managing your time well. It's really about right now managing performance, leading and developing other people. It's not about just embracing change. It's more like leading change. And it's not about just being a team player. It's really about managing conflicts. So at the same time, we notice that the experience has also stepped up. And perhaps the personal attributes, yes, they are expected to be everything that we see in the individual contributor success profile. But at the same time, there should be characteristics of, let's say, servant leader, and at the same time, someone who is cooperative so as to unite with peers laterally and passionate about the mission while also very keen in self-development. So I would like to show you a third success profile that I developed. Again, I like to remind you it's just a sample, not necessarily representative of what it should be for your organization, but something for reference for you to work on. Well, you can see that from the middle management level of just leading teams, this CEO level is expected to have strategic business and financial acumen. It's really about being broad, knowing everything that you should know in the country specific to policy making, advocacy, and fundraising, but at the same time being deep in the sector that you are leading the organization for. We are not talking about just leading people, but we are talking here about the expectations of having the skills to articulate visions that you could actually envisage in your minds. And at the same time, formulating strategies. And it's about stepping up, not just lead teams, but to unify different stakeholders, such as the board, and perhaps different teams who could be in check and balance departments. And at the same time, driving towards clear targets for results and nurturing a distinct culture that's based on your core values and leading the way in building pivotal alliance and not leading change, but leading transformation. And you would be expected to have the skills to develop leaders. So your personal attributes of being a caring person, personable, it's still there, but you have a stronger sense of presence, perhaps, in terms of being inspiring and motivating, visionary and influential, and at the same time persevering and optimistic, and definitely not just passionate about the mission, but passionate about changing the world. So this is where your experience leading organizations or departments, cross-cultural exposure, advocacy experience, and significant projects and postings and exchanges will really help. So with this, I would now move back to help you, to help you with a summary. So after looking at the success profiles for different levels in detail, I am sure you're getting ideas about its application. I've mentioned it just now that it is really very useful to help the organization and individuals in the organization plan towards your development, as you can see here. And at the same time, it also helps you in succession planning. It tells you how many people are ready for the next level. And that will give you an idea about the need to step in with perhaps external recruitment, or perhaps developing certain individuals to meet the requirements of the organizations in time to come. Success profiles definitely are very useful for selection as well. And they are also used by many organizations in performance management, because performance should not just be about what you have achieved for the organization. It should also be about how you achieved it, in terms of how you have worked with others, how you have led, and how you have contributed to the organization's culture. So these are the applications, very important applications of success profiles. And now perhaps that may interest you to think about, whoa, okay, that's something new. So how do I get started? All right. Well, I like to suggest that you could do some research on the internet to find different kinds of success profile. You may find that, for example, in UK, the UK government is also already has a success profile for the civil service sector. So there are many, many samples of success profiles out there. And with the benefit of research, you now go back to your organization by perhaps identifying in your organization the job groups and the different levels of leadership within each group. Why do I say job groups are important? For example, you have different departments, right? And you have like a fundraising team. Okay, so the domain is in fundraising. So in this fundraising team, what are the different levels? So you'll be able to identify the success profiles for each of this. And then you would then build the success profiles. And this should be done in consultation with, of course, all the leaders who involved in that particular domain. And I would like to say as well that, the reason why I say that my earlier success profiles are samples, because I developed it all on my own. So it's not really representative of everyone, but to ensure accuracy and reliability, it's better that you undertake this project together as a team. And you would then focus on criteria that would align with the organization's priorities. That's really important. And priorities are different for different organizations. And it's not possible for us to focus on so many things, so many development areas. It's better to just focus on 3, perhaps every year. And you should pilot test it by perhaps using it as a reference point for recruitment or for performance management, so that you could fine tune it over time. Okay. So I'm now going to talk about development, because that's basically what we are trying to figure out today. So we understand success profile is a point, it guides us in our development. So how then, okay, that very good. So now I've identified the development gaps. So how do I then develop myself? And how do I develop my team? Okay, that's a very good question and an important one. Even before we proceed, I like to clarify what development is. Because to many lay people, sending a person perhaps for a conference is development, or sending a person to attend a professional training is development. Well, at this point, it may be useful to know that that is a means towards development, because development is only attained when the person is able to translate whatever he or she has learned from the conference and the training into performance, right? So until they achieve that, they are still developing. The competencies, it's still not a part of them. So we have to understand, therefore, that development is a process. It takes time. So looking at the smart art that I have here, it starts with the assessment of the developmental needs. And that was what we have been talking about, right? And from there, you need to acquire knowledge and skills. That's the green circle. That would be sending them to the conference, or perhaps having a mentoring arrangement. And then when that is done, the next stage is to give time and opportunity for the individual to apply the recently acquired learning towards mastery. And when they finally achieve dependable abilities, that's when we have considered that they have developed. So I like to share a template that could be very useful in planning development. For example, when it comes to development planning, is it all about training? Is it all about attending conferences? Well, research has shown that development is optimal when you follow the 70-20-10 rule. What is this about? Well, learning events, that means structure and formal learning, should only be like about 10% of the development plan. 20% of a person's learning should come from community of practices like social learning, where you sit together or you discuss with your peers or you bounce ideas off your classmates, and that's or you follow the role modeling of someone and getting feedback. This kinds of social learning, it's 20%. And that helps to build learning momentum. And finally, most of the learning and the integration into your life comes from yourself. You have to do it yourself 70% of the time. That means you have to apply it. You've got to reflect. You've got to learn. You've got to experiment. You've got to refine your techniques. You basically have to do the research, do the reading yourself. And that's where organizations can provide opportunities, like having a special project for someone who just finished a particular training, so that they can apply the skills on a project that serves the organization well. Okay, so that is the 70-20-10 rule for development planning. And of course, as members of UICC, we are all united to fight cancer, because we understand that being an effective leader in your organization doesn't make the change that we are all hoping for. What we want is not just effectiveness in our leadership, in our organizations and countries, but we want to see the impact. The issues, for example, like poverty, cancer control, requires efforts from and collaborations with many different kinds of organizations all around the region and the world. And this is a very different kind of leadership that we need to be attuned to. And it's talking about a multi-sector coalition, working together with the aim to holistically improve conditions for groups of people, whether in a neighborhood, in a region, or certain country. And for this kinds of work, we are looking at what we call collective action or collective leadership. So this is a type of leadership that everyone in UICC, as long as you're part of it, we are, we need to develop. It's called collective leadership. All right. We need to understand that working in a coalition for greater social impact requires us to be motivated towards a common goal and a vision that we all share. And the quality of what we can achieve pretty much depends on how we work with each other and the relationship between ourselves and the systems that we lead. So I would like us to ponder about the success profile of a collective action leader. But before that, I would just like to clarify what collective leadership stands for. Okay, so that you can figure out the success profile with me later on. Firstly, in collective leadership, There is shared responsibility, decision-making and accountability, and authentic engagement. The vision is created by all of us, and we have to be committed to working to achieving that vision, not just a full-time staff of UICC, every one of us. Because collective leadership assumes that every one of us can and should lead. But for collective leadership to work well, for success of the whole to happen, there needs to be trust. There needs to be shared power, transparency and effective communication, accountability, and very important, shared learning. It is based on the recognition that without the gifts and the talents and the perspectives and the efforts of every one of us, sustainable change would be difficult to achieve. Creativity is unleashed when we tap into our fullest abilities and capacities. And when collective leadership is present, people would say, we have done this good thing ourselves. So, what do you think, therefore, is the success profile? Well, right here, I would like to say that the collective leader doesn't just see his or her own vision, but she sees the overarching mission of this coalition that she or he is part of. And he or she is able to align his or her organization's mission towards the overarching vision of the collective mission. At the same time, being part of UICC and all the diversity, which is so lovely, it is also very perplexing sometimes. Things can get so ambiguous because the problems that we are talking about, it's complex and it's different in different countries. And it's being solved differently in different countries. So how do we take collective action for a matter like cancer control that it's so different in different parts of the world? So I think one of the competencies that we need to have as part of collective leadership is to be comfortable with ambiguity and have the skill to manage complexity. How do we make complicated things simple to understand? How do we get a line action that everybody understands with so many competing demands for us, right? So I would like to say, perhaps we need to think about developing a global mindset of cancer control. And we also need to understand not just our country and regions, but having knowledge of the positions and the interests of different stakeholders around the world, as well as politics and legislation and broad sector knowledge would be very, very useful, critical for us. And in terms of our skills and abilities, I think we need to have a lot more initiative as shared leaders in collective leadership. We cannot wait to be told what to do by our facilitators. We pretty much have to offer leadership because we are also leaders. We have to offer actions towards the way that we would share as the way forward. We have to do more than just sharing, than just expounding. And perhaps even amongst ourselves, we don't have to wait for a community practice group to be formed. We can do so through our own initiative. And to do that, we really need to be very interested and very agile in our learning approach. So the personal attributes could be, inspiring and visionary and influential, someone who's opportunistic and innovative. Well, and definitely not just passionate about changing the world, but passionate about making sustainable impact. That's what we are here for. So with this, I'd like to encourage all of you to maintain contact cross-culturally, be involved in international advocacy to UICC, be involved in the global scale projects. And perhaps this is a great way for us to start, okay, through our involvement in UICC. But individually in our organizations, we can also start sharing leadership with our team members, with our volunteers, as well as the people whom we help. And this could be a way of social change and the impact that we want to see eventually. So with this, I would like to summarize that I've spoken about at the beginning, the 4 challenges that nonprofit CEO face. And I ventured into detailed success profiles, as well as explaining the applications of success profiles. I've offered some advice on leadership development. And finally, I spoke about collective leadership. So I like to end with a quote that's very powerful. It says, power with others rather than power over others. This is the way that we can lead ourselves and our world into a better future. Thank you.